They said she left the keep of her own will. They said the healer packed her satchel in the gray hour before dawn, slipped past the wolves at the north postern, and walked herself into the forest road that wound toward the river crossing and the villages beyond. They said the Alpha King let her go, and that was proof enough she had never mattered. They were wrong on every count. She had not walked anywhere. She had been escorted from the hall by the steward's men and given until nightfall to remove herself from the mountain keep. And the Alpha King had not let her go. He had not known. The man who commanded the largest war pack in the northern reaches, who had brought 3 border lords to their knees and held the Grey Treaty together for 11 years by force of presence alone, had not known that his own steward had sent away the woman his wolf would not release. He found out at the 3rd hour past midnight, when the great gray wolf he carried inside him rose in his chest like a tide and pressed against his ribs until breathing hurt. And then the wolf did what it had been doing for 16 days, ever since she first set her hands on his wound in the garrison infirmary, and the world had tilted on its axis beneath them both. It sat down and refused to move. What follows is what actually happened. Sit with it. The histories of this mountain remember a king who knelt in the snow, and they remember the woman who made him. They remember what the steward could not hide. The year was the 432nd year of the Greymark Pact, deep into the frost month, the cold so absolute that breath hung in the air like smoke, and the sentries wrapped their hands in doubled wool and still lost feeling by the 2nd hour of their watch. It was the kind of winter the northern mountains had not seen in a generation, the kind that drove the packs down from the high ridges into the lower valleys and made the village healers work through every dark hour. The keep of Veldra sat above the tree line on a granite shelf that caught the wind from 3 directions at once. It was not a comfortable fortress. It was a defensible one, and in the north, that was the only kind that mattered. Her name was Nara. She had come up from the valley village of Thornfen with a pack mule, 2 panniers of medicinal stores, and a letter of commission from the garrison quartermaster, who had run through his usual healers, one taken sick, one snowed in past the lower crossing, one who had simply looked at the number of infected wounds waiting in the garrison ward and declined the assignment before the first snow fell. Nara had not declined. She had asked about the stores available, confirmed they had wolfsbane-treated silver in the surgical kit, adjusted her estimate of what she would need, and said she would begin in the morning. She was not a wolf. In the hierarchy of the mountain packs, that placed her at the lowest possible rung, below the lowest-ranked omegas, below the unmated betas, below anyone who could shift and demonstrate their standing through the body. The steward, a man called Ordric, had made that clear within the first hour of her arrival. He had a way of looking past her when she spoke, addressing his responses to a point slightly above her head, as though she were a piece of furniture that had learned to talk. He called her the Valley Woman when he referred to her at all. He did not use her name. This was not uncommon in the mountain keeps, and she had expected it, and it did not change what she was there to do. What she had not expected was the wolf. She had been in the garrison ward for 3 days before she saw the Alpha King. She knew he was in the keep, and the whole weight of the place reorganized around his presence the way a tree bends in a strong current, the sentries standing a fraction more upright, the kitchen fires burning a fraction hotter, the conversations in the corridors dropping by half a register whenever a door near his quarters opened. She had learned to read keeps this way, by the behavior of the people inside them rather than by anyone telling her anything directly. No one told healers much directly. They learned by watching. She saw him on the 4th morning when he came to the garrison ward himself to check on his second captain, who had taken a crossbow bolt through the shoulder in the border skirmish 12 days prior and was running a fever that had not yet broken. The Alpha King came alone. He was tall, broad through the shoulder, with the particular kind of stillness that very dangerous men sometimes possessed, as though they had so thoroughly accounted for the space around them that nothing could surprise them inside it. He had a scar along the left side of his jaw, old and clean, the kind that healed well because the one who had received it had the constitution to demand that of it. His eyes were dark, the color of river stones under water. He came to the ward, checked his captain, and then stopped when he reached the end of the pallet row where Nara was working. She was packing a wound. She did not look up. The wound required attention, and the position of the man who commanded the keep was not, in that moment, relevant to the function of her hands. He said nothing. She registered the quality of the stillness at the edge of her peripheral vision, a stillness different from the ones preceding it, denser somehow, and accompanied by a faint warmth that had no source in the ward. She finished what she was doing, sealed the bandage, and then she finished what she was doing, sealed the bandage, and looked up. His face was expressionless. His wolf, she realized in the next breath, was not. She could feel it through the air in the way wolves sometimes leaked into a room when they were not wholly contained, a pressure at the base of the sternum, a faint pull like a current against a boat's hull. She had felt this before, occasionally, in wolf-heavy communities. She had never felt it directed specifically at her. She said, "My lord." He said nothing for 1 full second. Then he said, "You are the valley healer." "Yes." "The captain's fever?" "Down 2 degrees since yesterday. If it holds, he will not lose the arm." He nodded once. He left. She looked back at her work, and then paused, because something was sitting differently in her chest than it had when he came in, and she could not name it. So she filed it in the category of things she would examine later and returned her attention to what was in front of her. She did not examine it later. She was too busy. The garrison ward had 9 patients. 2 were serious, 5 were recovering, and 2 were what she privately called the self-sustaining kind. Men who would heal at their own pace, regardless of what she did and needed primarily to be kept from doing something inadvisable with the wound while healing happened. She worked through the short northern daylight and into the evening by firelight, and she slept in the small room the garrison quartermaster had assigned her, which had 1 window, 1 cot, and a door that latched from inside, which she appreciated. On the 6th day, Ordric came to inform her that her space in the garrison ward was needed, and she could set up in the old still room on the lower keep level. The still room was colder, darker, and harder to reach from the sleeping quarters of the men she was treating. She said she understood and moved her supplies that evening. On the 7th day, the garrison quartermaster brought her a wool blanket, said nothing, and left. She suspected he had heard about the still room and was capable of embarrassment where his superior was not. His name was Kale. She thanked him, and he turned red across the ears, and she noted that some of the better parts of any keep lived in its quartermasters and its cooks. On the 8th evening, the wolf came to her. She was grinding astringent bark by candlelight when she heard the scratching at the door, low and deliberate. She thought at first it was one of the garrison hounds, who sometimes wandered the lower levels. She opened the door and found a wolf the size of a draft horse standing in the corridor. She went very still. The wolf did too. It was gray, the color of storm cloud where its fur ran deep, and almost white at the chest and muzzle, and its eyes were amber, the particular warm amber that wolves' eyes carried when they were looking rather than hunting. It was looking at her. It was not hunting her. The distinction, in her experience, was one you felt in the back of your spine before you could articulate it, and her spine was calm. She said, "Hello." The wolf breathed out through its nose, a long exhale. Then it lay down in the doorway. She waited. It did not move. She stepped over it, carefully, went back inside, and went back to grinding bark. After a time, she heard the wolf shift in the doorway and come inside. It lay behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of it radiating against her back, which in the still room's cold was not unwelcome. She did not mention this to anyone. She did not need to speculate about whose wolf it was. There was only one wolf in this keep, whose size would present that particular argument for the eye, and the warmth at her back through the cold of the grinding work held something in it that she had been carefully not examining since the 4th day in the ward. She examined it now. She held it at a distance, the way she held an unfamiliar herb before she used it, turned it, assessed it, and then put it down carefully in a place she could find it again. She was not foolish enough to name it. She was not foolish enough to think it was more than what it was, which was a wolf's interest, which did not belong to her, and was not her to hold. But she let herself feel the warmth of it for the time it was present, and she did not look at it too directly. And when the wolf rose at the second bell of night and pushed out through the door and was gone, she felt the cold of the still room settle back across her shoulders like a dropped cloak. She slept. She worked. The wolf came back the following evening and the one after. On the 11th day, Ordric appeared in the still-room doorway with 2 of the steward's men behind him. He looked at her with the expression he always wore, the one that landed somewhere between contempt and a kind of proprietary satisfaction, as though what he was about to say had been a long time arranged, and he was only now collecting on it. He said she had been engaged for the garrison ward specifically, that the garrison ward work was now essentially complete, and that keep healers did not live in the lower levels consuming the keep's firewood through an indeterminate extension of their commission. He said the quartermaster would help her pack her things in the morning and that the east road was passable as far as the lower crossing. She said, "The east road is passable in the daylight. It is not passable in the dark, and I have patients I will not leave mid-course." Ordric said the patients were wards, not her patients. He said she had until nightfall. She packed what she needed and was out of the keep before nightfall, because she was not suicidal, and Ordric had 2 men with him, and she had a satchel of herbs. She told herself as she went down the mountain road that this was what she had known it would be, eventually, and that she had known from the first morning that nothing she did in this keep was truly hers to keep. She told herself she had work to return to in Thornfen, and that was true. And she told herself the warmth that had lived in her back for several evenings would fade in a day or 2. And she told herself she was not listening for the sound of a wolf in the forest road behind her. The forest road was silent. She walked. She did not listen. This story might have ended on that road, cold and ordinary and silent. It would have, if not for what happened after midnight in the quarters of the Alpha King of the Northern Mountain Packs. He had felt it leave. He had not understood what he was feeling, only that the wolf inside him had been sitting in the direction of the lower keep every evening for 6 days, its attention fixed and patient, and now it rose to its feet and stood in the direction of the east road and pressed against his ribs until he could not breathe. He had sent for Cale first. Cale had told him, in the flat, miserable way of a man who knows the answer will not be welcome, that the healer had departed by the steward's order at the evening bell. His name was Devon. He had been the Alpha King of the Veldra Packs for 9 years, and he had not raised his voice to one of his own household members since his 3rd year of tenure, because he had learned that it accomplished less than the correct quantity of silence at the correct moment. He did not raise his voice now. He looked at Cale and said, "How long?" "3 hours, my lord." The wolf inside him stood in the direction of the east road and refused to move. He went to Ordric's quarters. Ordric was not asleep. The sound of Davon's knock, which was the knock of a man who could take the door off its hinges if the alternative presented itself, had a way of preempting sleep in nearby rooms. Ordric opened the door and looked at him with an expression that still carried some portion of its righteous satisfaction, and Devon looked at him and said, "You will tell me why you dismissed the Valley Healer, and you will tell me now." Ordric had a story prepared. He had had it prepared for several days. He said the commission was complete, the patients recovering, the expense of maintaining a non-wolf healer in the keep, past the terms of engagement an unnecessary drain. He said a healer who spent her evenings in the lower corridors, unescorted, was a liability of a specific kind he did not need to name. He did not name it. He said the valley woman had been adequately compensated, and the quartermaster had confirmed her road fitness. Devon said, Kale. Kale appeared in the doorway. My lord. Did you confirm her road fitness? A pause. I was told her commission was concluded and the road was clear. My lord. There was a particular kind of silence that fell in the corridor then. Ordrick's expression changed. Not much. Enough. Devon said, Take 4 of the long-range scouts, mounted. I want the east road covered to the lower crossing and back. Bring her back to the keep. Do not alarm her. Tell her the Alpha King requests her return. Use the word requests. He looked at Ordrick for a long moment and said nothing else, and then he turned and walked back toward his own quarters, and the wolf in his chest sat down in the direction of the east road and waited with a patience that bore its own quality of menace. Nara had made it to the shelter lean-to at the 3rd-mile marker, which was the last reliable shelter before the lower crossing, and the place she had intended to spend the night. She had a fire. She was not comfortable, but she was not cold, and she had the kind of internal arrangement that traveling healers developed about discomfort, which was that it was a condition rather than an emergency, and conditions could be endured. She was eating hard bread and thinking about the morning's route when she heard horses. 4 riders on mountain scouts, blowing cold in the dark. The one at the front dismounted and walked to her fire and said he was sent by the Alpha King, and that the Alpha King requested her return to the keep. He said, requested with the careful, particular emphasis of a man who had been specifically instructed to use that word. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at the fire, and then at the road she had intended to finish in the morning, and she thought about the warmth that had lived in her back for 6 evenings and the cost of being foolish about it. She said, On what grounds does he request it? The scout hesitated. He did not specify the grounds, healer. Only that it was a request and not a command, and that you were to understand the distinction. She was quiet for a long moment. The cold pressed in around the fire's small radius. She thought about the wolf in the still-room doorway, the exhale through its nose, the amber eyes that had held hers with something in them she did not want to name and was not going to name. She thought about Ordrick and the satisfaction in his face, the way that kind of satisfaction always assumed it had won, and the way it was almost never right about how long the winning lasted. She said, I will need my mule. The mule was retrieved. She rode back up the mountain road with 4 scouts at her back and the cold coming down through the pines like a judgment, and she arrived at the gates of the keep at the 2nd hour past midnight, and she was taken not to the garrison ward or the still room, but to the receiving hall, where a fire had been lit in the hearth, large enough to push the cold back from the room's center, and the Alpha King of the northern mountain packs was standing beside it. He turned when she entered. He was in informal dress, the heavy wool tunic of a man who had dressed quickly, no chain of office, no formal outer coat. The scar along his jaw caught the firelight. His hands were at his sides, and they were very still, which she had learned was the particular stillness of a man actively choosing not to reach for anything. He said, Healer, I am sorry for what was done in my name. She was tired from the road and cold, and she had not been expecting that. She said, My lord. He said, You were dismissed by my steward without my knowledge or consent. The commission was not complete. 3 of the garrison patients were not yet stable. The road in the dark in the frost month is not safe passage for one woman with a mule. A pause. I am sorry, he said again. It landed differently the 2nd time. You were treated without dignity in this keep, and you deserved better. The fire popped. She was quiet. She had been a valley healer for 11 years, and she had been told a great many things in that time, and almost none of them had been apologies. She was not sure what to do with this one except receive it carefully, the way she received anything whose properties she had not yet tested. She said, Who told you? Kale confirmed the method of your dismissal. Ordric told me the rest himself, and did not understand what he was telling me. And what will happen to Ordric? He looked at her. It was a direct look, the kind that did not avoid what it was looking at, and in it she saw the same thing she had seen in the garrison ward on the fourth morning, the thing she had put in a place to examine later and had carefully not examined since. He will answer for it, Devon said. Before me, and before the keep. Not tonight, and before the week is out. That is not why I asked. I know. He was quiet for a moment. You asked because you wanted to know whether I understood what he had done. Not just to you. To the keep. He looked at the fire and then back at her. I understand. She had been standing in the doorway. She stepped into the room. The fire's warmth was very good against the cold she was still carrying from the road, and she let herself feel it. The way she had let herself feel the warmth at her back in the still room without looking at it too directly. She said, My patients. Cale has a report on each of them. He will bring it to you in the morning. I will need my still room back. Or a better room. The still room is too cold for the medicines. Something in his face shifted. It was small, a fraction of easing around the set of his jaw. He said, You will have a workroom on the second level, heated. You will have whatever the stores can provide. A pause. If you stay. She looked at him. He looked at her. The wolf in him was visible in that moment in the way it had been in the garrison ward. Not suppressed, but not announced either. Present in the quality of the air between them, the warmth that had no source in the fire alone. She had put it in a place to examine carefully, and she had been careful, and she was not going to be reckless now. Not with this. Not with something that belonged to the most powerful man in the mountain packs, and was currently looking at her from across a hearth-lit room as though she were the axis the room turned on. She said, There is a condition. Name it. I am addressed as Nara, or as Healer Nara, or as Healer. I am not the Valley Woman. I am not she or her when I am in the room. I am not a piece of furniture. He said without any hesitation at all. Yes. And Ordric does not handle anything touching my work or my quarters. Also yes. She nodded. She was aware that her heart was doing something it had been doing since she walked into this room. Something she was not going to name tonight, and possibly not for several days. Then I will stay, she said, and we can discuss the extended terms of the commission in the morning. He said, In the morning. She left. She found the room Cale had quietly arranged on the second level, with a fire banked warm and a basin of clean water and a door that latched, and she set down her satchel and stood in the good warmth of it and let herself, finally, examine the thing she had been filing away for 16 days. It was terrifying. It was also, in the specific way of things that are terrifying because they are real rather than because they are false, very steady. She had held it up and looked at it and put it back carefully, and she knew what it was, and she knew it was not hers to hold, and she knew all of this and went to sleep anyway, in the warmth, because she was tired and the mountain keep was cold, and some things could be held off until the morning. She was not expecting the morning to bring what it brought. What it brought was Ordric, at the 7th bell, before Cale had delivered the patient reports, and before the second-level workroom had been fully arranged. Ordric came to the door of her room with 2 of his men again, and his expression had hardened past righteous satisfaction into something colder. And he said she had put ideas in the king's head that did not belong there, and that the commission was a garrison matter and would be concluded by the garrison authority, and that the king would understand this when he had more distance from whatever sentiment had caused his lapse in judgment the previous evening. He said the word sentiment the way he would say rot or waste. She said, Get away from my door, Ordric. He said the king's wolf was his own business, and she had no claim on it, and she never would. She said, I have no claim on anything in this keep. I have a commission and a room and a list of patients who are not yet stable, and you are standing in the way of all of them. Move." He did not move. He said she would find the East Road considerably less welcoming the second time, and that the quartermaster had been reminded of his proper loyalties. From the corridor behind Ordric came a sound. It was quiet, which made it the more specific kind of terrifying. It was the sound of a very large body going very still in the way of something that has made a decision about what happens next. The wolf was at the end of the corridor. It was not the soft amber-eyed wolf of the stillroom evenings. It was the full-standing gray wolf of the mountain packs, shoulder at the height of Ordric's chest. Its eyes lit a particular hot amber that was not the warm watching amber she had seen in her doorway. It looked at Ordric. Ordric looked at it. One of the men behind him stepped back. The wolf walked forward. It walked the length of the corridor at a pace that was not hurried and did not need to be, and it stopped between Nara's doorway and Ordric, and it sat down. It did not growl. It did not show teeth. It simply sat in the corridor between her and the steward and looked at Ordric with the patient amber eyes of a thing that has all the time in the world to wait for a correct decision to be made. Ordric said very quietly, "My lord." From behind him, from the direction of the stair, came the Alpha King. He was in full formal dress, chain of office, heavy outer cloak, iron circlet, and he had clearly dressed for this, not come unprepared, which meant he had known, which meant Kale had known and reported, and she registered this in the part of her mind that tracked the keep's intelligence the way she tracked a patient's fever. Devon walked past Ordric and stopped beside the wolf, and he looked at his steward for a long moment, and then he said, "You have been in front of this door once already this morning." Ordric began. "My lord, the matter of the commission," Ordric began. "The matter of the commission is resolved. The matter of my steward issuing a dismissal without my sanction, misrepresenting the status of the patients, and returning before dawn to intimidate a woman who is under this keep's hospitality. That matter is not resolved." He was very quiet. The wolf at his side was very still. Nara, in her doorway, was very still too, because the thing she had been not examining had just walked into the corridor in full formal dress with its wolf sitting at its feet and its eyes on its steward, and she needed a moment. Ordric was relieved of his keys before the assembly of the keep's senior staff at the midday bell. It was not a spectacle. It was a specific formal proceeding, conducted in the hall with the garrison quartermaster and the two senior pack betas, and the kitchen head all present as witnesses, and Devon stated what had occurred and what would follow, and Ordric stood and heard it, and his face did the thing that faces do when the certainty they have built their conduct on is publicly named as wrong, and everyone in the room confirms the naming with their silence. Nara was not in the hall for the proceeding. She was in the second-level workroom, which had been properly arranged by Kale and two garrison women who moved with the efficiency of people deeply invested in righting a wrong through physical competence. She was reviewing the patient reports when she heard the bell and then the quiet that followed it. She looked up, and then back at her reports, and she felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled since the moment Ordric had appeared in the stillroom doorway 6 days ago. Kale knocked and said, when she opened, "The former steward has been assigned to the outer garrison and removed from keep authority healer. My lord wanted you to know." A pause. "He wanted me to say that if you had other conditions, you should name them," she said. "Tell him thank you. Tell him the workroom is well arranged and I have no further conditions at this time." Kale's ears went slightly red. "Yes, healer. He was an excellent quartermaster." She was glad she had thanked him for the blanket. That evening, she was in the workroom when she heard a sound at the door. She had been expecting it, in the careful, cautious way she had allowed herself to expect it, and she said, "Come in." And the wolf came in and lay down behind her chair, where the warmth of the brazier collected against the wall, and she went on with what she was doing, and the warmth at her back was exactly what it had been in the still room, steady and real and not hers to hold, and she held it anyway, for the time it was present. She heard the second door an hour later, the outer workroom door this time, a single knock with the weight and particularity she had already learned to recognize. She said, "Come in." Devon came in. He was in informal dress again, the heavy wool, and he looked at the wolf behind her chair and then at her, and the wolf looked at him with the amber eyes of a thing that had arranged this outcome with some intention and was content with its work. He said, "I would speak with you, if you are willing." "I'm willing." He sat across the work table from her, and the wolf was between them, and the fire in the brazier made the room smaller and warmer than the mountain keep usually managed. He said, "You understand what the wolf is telling you." She said, "I am a healer in a wolf-heavy community. I understand some things about what wolves tell the people they sit next to." "Then you understand why I came to apologize last night." "I understand you came to apologize for the commission." He was quiet. "I came to apologize for everything," he said. "For the still room, for the treatment, for the road in the dark in the frost month." A pause. "For being a king who did not know what was happening in his own keep until his wolf went to the door of a woman who deserved to have been brought through the front and given a name from the beginning." She looked at him. He looked at her. The wolf between them was extremely still and extremely pleased with itself. She said, "I would like to know something." "Ask." "The evening you came to the garrison ward, the fourth day." "Yes." "The way you left." "Yes." "Did you know then?" He was quiet for a moment, not evasive, honest. He said, "I knew something. I did not know what to do with it. I have not." He stopped, started again. "The wolf has not sat still in the direction of any person in 9 years. I did not know how to account for what it was doing." A pause. "I handled it very badly." "You sent your wolf to my still room every evening for 6 days instead of coming yourself." "Yes." "That is possibly the most elaborate evasion I have encountered in 11 years of practice." He looked at her. Something moved in his face, very briefly. She thought it might, in a less controlled man, have been the beginning of something less than fully solemn. It was gone quickly. He said, "It is." She folded her hands on the work table. She had been a valley healer for 11 years, and she had handled things with care and examined them at a safe distance, and put them down in places she could find them again, and she was aware that she had been doing this with the specific thing currently sitting across her work table since the 4th morning in the garrison ward. She was also aware that she was sitting in a warm room in a mountain keep in the frost month, with an alpha king across the table, and his wolf between them and the entire machinery of what had happened in the past 24 hours, arranged around a very particular fact. She said, "I am not a wolf. I have no pack, no rank, no bond standing in any pack hierarchy. I am a valley healer from Thornfen." "I know." "And you are the Alpha King." "I know that too." "Then you understand," she said carefully, "that this requires more time. Not because I do not understand what the wolf is telling me, but because it is a serious thing, and I take serious things at the pace they require." He said, "How long?" She said, "I don't know yet." He said, "I can wait." He said it in the way of a man who meant it, and the wolf at his feet laid its head on its paws and closed its eyes with an air of complete satisfaction, and the fire in the brazier put warmth across the work table between them, and the frost month pressed its cold against the outer walls of the keep, and the mountain held them inside its granite patience, and it was enough, for now, to be warm and named and not sent away. 3 weeks later, when the thaw began at the lower crossing, and a message came from the village of Thornfen asking when the healer planned to return, Nara sat in the warm second-level workroom and wrote back that she had extended her commission through the spring and would send instruction for the village herb stores by messenger. The wolf was asleep beside the brazier. The Alpha King was in the hall dealing with the border lords, because the border lords were always dealing with something, and peace was an active condition, not a passive one. Kale had left a pot of tisane on the corner of the work table, still warm, with the particular thoughtfulness of a man who had no difficulty at all knowing which side of a changed wind he stood on. Outside, the first melt was beginning on the south-facing rock. The ice in the upper courtyard was going gray at the edges, the way ice goes just before it releases. Spring was still distant, but it was present in the quality of the light, and the mountain, which had held its cold without apology all through the frost month, began very slowly to let it go. She was still there when the ice fully broke. She was there when the spring council convened, and Devon stood before the assembled border lords and the pack betas and the garrison seniors and said that the commission of healer Nara of Thornfen was extended to a permanent appointment in the keep of Veldra, by his authority and by his wolves. He did not kneel in that room, not yet. That came later in the open courtyard on the first clear day of true spring, before the garrison and the household and the 3 border lords who had stayed on through the season, when he went down on one knee on the wet cobblestones and held his hand up to her, the scarred hand of a man who had run a mountain keep for 9 years on force of presence and occasional force of the other kind, and offered it with a steadiness that had nothing in it of performance. She put her hand in his. The wolf at his side breathed out through its nose, a long, slow exhale of something that sounded like satisfaction that had been a long time in arriving. 9 years later, the pack histories of Veldra recorded it plainly. The Alpha King's wolf had not let the healer leave. He had come to apologize. What followed was a matter of public record, witnessed by every senior member of the keep's staff, by 3 border lords, by the garrison of 200 men who had learned in the months of her commission that when healer Nara said a thing would be done a certain way, it would be done a certain way, and they had generally stopped arguing about it before the first thaw. What the histories could not fully record was the quality of the warmth in the second-level workroom on a cold frost month evening, the wolf between them, the fire steady. They could not record what it felt like to be a valley healer who had walked down a mountain road in the dark and been brought back up it with a word and a request, not a command. They could not record the way she had held the terrible real thing she had been careful about for 16 days and looked at it finally in a warm room at the pace it required and found it still there, unchanged by careful handling, solid as the granite the keep stood on. What they could record was this. The stone above the healer's workroom door was engraved, at some point in the years following, with a single line. Not a title, not a proclamation. A plain declarative in the script of the mountain records. She came back.